The history of Soviet animation. A story of genius visionaries, cultural classics, and some really crazy shit. Soviet animation is fascinating. It's also diverse, very diverse. So many different genres, styles, techniques changed over the years that it's hard to keep track of them. First came the 1920s avant-garde animation experiments, works groundbreaking in the field of giving people nightmares. When the Soviets realized that they didn't know how to make cartoons for normal people, they copied Walt Disney. And for a few years all their characters looked like Donald Duck's deformed cousins. During the war, as you'd expect, the cartoons were all about making fun of a certain mustached man. After the war though, the Americans were suddenly the bad guys, and the animators had to quickly abandon all those bouncy Disney rejects and come up with something original. A period of feature-length movies followed, usually with fairy tale plots, and so much rotoscoping that they could have just made them live-action films instead. For a while, there was a certain pseudo-realistic style which everyone conformed to, but by the 1960s, the Soviets were once again experimenting with animation, and this is where you start seeing filmmakers with personal, distinctive visuals. The following decades were a golden age of Soviet animation, producing classic after classic, many of which still live today as soulless money printers. After a brief triumph in the 1930s, stop motion became big again, providing employment for artists who never learned to draw. Some of the Soviet republics had their own animation studios, contributing a unique ethnic influence and culture-specific weirdness. Even during the final years of the USSR, the animators continued to innovate, however terrifying the results might have been. All in all, about 3,000 animated films were made in the Soviet Union, and at least a few of them are actually worth watching. So, where do we begin? Well, how about at the very beginning? And I do mean the very beginning, even before the USSR was a thing. We start with the animation of the Russian Empire. Now, there are two people responsible for trailblazing Russian animation. One of them became quite famous, but I want to first talk about the other, lesser-known person. Aleksandr Shiryayev was, as you'd probably never guess, a ballet dancer. He was trying to find a way to record dance movements for reference, and he even bought a movie camera, but that wasn't enough for him. Shiryayev started drawing dances frame by frame, which, if animated, turns into a cartoon of sorts. So basically, he was doing a form of rotoscoping. He did actually preserve many unique dances which were otherwise lost to time. But that wasn't good enough for him either. Shiryayev's solution was to build a miniature stage and painstakingly animate performances using stop-motion dolls. And he got really good at it. Each one of his short films increased in complexity. My favorite would have to be Pierrot-Artists, about two clowns who are trying to paint the back of the stage, but keep fooling around and pranking each other. It's pretty funny, but also technologically impressive. Shiryayev's most elaborate film is the Harlequin's Joke, which had many characters, several diverse settings, magic happening, and a complicated plot which, honestly, I don't fully comprehend, but it looks very interesting. Not only Shiryayev made some of the earliest stop-motion cartoons, but he may very well be Russia's first filmmaker. Unfortunately, all of Shiryayev's films were made for personal use and never shown in the theater in his lifetime. For many years, no one even knew that Shiryayev made these films, until they were rediscovered in the 1990s and a documentary film was made about him. In the meanwhile, Vladislav Starevich was considered the father of Russian animation, even though he might have been Polish, I'm not sure. Like Shiryayev, he came from an unrelated profession. Starevich was an entomologist, a bug scientist. The story goes that Starevich was trying to film an experiment with beetles, but couldn't get the results he wanted. So he simply animated the dead bugs, which gave him an idea and began a whole series of bizarre stop-motion films with bugs. His first commercially released film was the beautiful Leukanida, a story of two medieval beetle kingdoms going to war over a supposedly sexy beetle lady. Then there was The Cameraman's Revenge, a comedic story of infidelity. The husband beetle is cheating on his wife with some dragonfly floozy, so a mistreated grasshopper gets some juicy evidence by pointing a portable camera through a hotel room keyhole. Not sure that I want to see the resulting footage. Turns out that while the husband was busy, his wife was also entertaining someone. And The Grasshopper and the Ant is an age-old fable of a hard-working insect spending his summer preparing for the cold weather, while the grasshopper partied hard with the expected outcome. While making cartoons, Starevich also worked on live-action films, such as The Night Before Christmas, a trippy fantasy tale which probably looked really amazing for its time, and The Journey to the Moon, a sadly unfinished science fiction movie. Starevich continued to make films during the First World War, now with some political content. In the Lily of Belgium, angry beetles attack a defenseless flower, while the frogs and grasshoppers come to protect it. Even pine cones come alive to fight the invaders, because why not? Unfortunately, the war wasn't working out well for Russia. Then some revolutions happened, then a civil war. It just wasn't a very good time. Starevich left for France, where he continued a successful animation career, but back in Russia, for the next several years, the animation industry came to a complete halt. Thank you for watching the first episode of this new series. At the end of each episode, I'd like to suggest specific films to those wishing to explore the topic. And for today's viewing list, I'd recommend Pierrot-Artists by Shiryayev and The Cameraman's Revenge by Starevich. Actually, all of the cartoons I mentioned are interesting in their own way, and are pretty short too. If you have the time, then check out the documentary about Shiryayev. It's called A Belated Premiere. In the next episode, we'll take a look at the earliest Soviet cartoons, which I'm sure will be completely normal and not at all ugly or terrifying.